Good evening. Nice that we are meeting together. Why do some students fall by the wayside if the teacher knows when a student is ready? Very few students fall by the wayside after a certain point in their development. And up to that time, even though the teacher knows the student is ready, the student does not always fulfill that readiness. The reason is this. Up to a certain point in spiritual development, we have personal sense. That is, we have a sense of selfhood. I call it Joel, and you call it Bill or Mary or whatever it may be. And this is the reason that any student may fall by the wayside. That sense of personal self. To begin with, as long as we have a personal sense of self, we are trying to protect it. And if anything seems to threaten it, we rise right up and do battle. And this may cause us to fall by the wayside, because we are not to take up the sword. In the case of Judas Iscariot, is it not clear that there was enough sense of personal selfhood that he wanted to be top banana? He wanted to be the important one. And as soon as anyone else seemed to gain the favor of the teacher, evidently Judas rose up to protect his position. He was very close to the master, you know. The master had made him treasurer. And when you trust a man with your money, why, he's quite close to you. This personal sense of self that has left in it a trace of ambition or envy, jealousy. This is enough to trip up a student at any state of their development until they have completely lost the sense of self, and then there is no further possibility of falling away. You must remember, we have here 3 temptations. Temptation for fame, temptation for money, even when it's not a mad ambition for money, just the ambition for safety and security. These are your devil tempters, because there is no need for safety or security. There is no need to be concerned about a future. And until one has attained that, there is always the danger that the temptation is going to be there and can win. Again, on the spiritual path, if every individual were alone in the world, had no relatives, no family, this temptation would be less, because it isn't necessary to go far on the spiritual path to lose all fear of lack or limitation or the future. But if one has a family to provide for, that is where the devil gets in the temptation. You better take care of them. And then comes the temptation to fall from grace. Not by having an abundance of money, That is no sin. One may have millions without sinning. The sin would be in resorting to some human mode or means of attaining it, and using some human means and thereby losing the spiritual demonstration. Therefore, the answer to the three temptations, or as many other temptations as can come, are all embodied in that term personal sense, or sense of personal selfhood. You see, it is only with the final illumination, the one that has come to so few people in the history of the world, that final revelation when they have experienced God incarnating as individual man, that personal sense is dead, because there is no man now. Fame can mean nothing, fortune can mean nothing, safety can mean nothing. How can God be safe? How can God be secure? How can God have abundance? There is no such thing. But remember that we are not dealing with students who have attained that final revelation of God incarnated as myself. Do you remember the Master saying, "Thou seest me, thou seest the Father that sent me"? Now you know how few there are who can make that statement. You are looking at God. Until that time, there is some measure of personal sense, and one could fall. After that time, there is no personal sense anymore. There is no I or me. There is only God. There is only the light itself. There is only the Spirit itself, and this is self-supporting, self-maintaining, self-sustaining. It needs no help from any human means. Does not a spiritual teacher sometimes misjudge the readiness of the student? Yes, it could very well be. I'm certain that Jesus misjudged about 12 of his disciples. We can't be much doubt about that. But he took those most nearly ready that he came in contact with. And he didn't do too badly. 2 or 3 of them turned out fairly well. And that's a good percentage. Now, you must remember that he had a limited amount of people, and mostly of that type of fishermen, illiterate, ignorant, and certainly untrained in spiritual things. Probably had they all been Essenes, he would have had a better percentage. But they weren't. Now, it is difficult, in fact it is impossible, for any teacher to say, you are perfect. You are going to attain the full selflessness. That's an impossibility. The best that a teacher knows is that you are ready. Not necessarily that you're going to fulfill yourself, not necessarily you're going to attain, but you have all of the qualities. You show forth all of the qualities necessary for attainment. And from here on in, it's going to be up to you whether or not you can. Then the teacher gives to the student all that the teacher has to give. And then it rests with the student to what extent they're going to complete the journey. No teacher can complete the journey for a student. They can only take them lift them, bring them to discernment, and at a certain point, when so instructed within, can confer the initiation. And from then on, the student working with the teacher can go forward. Whether or not they attain the full measure in this lifetime remains to be seen. In the Western world, there is far less opportunity of a student attaining even an initiation than in the Western world, and than in the Eastern world, because in the Western world we are brought up from babyhood with the idea of equality. We are all equal. I'm as good as you are. And therefore, we do not have the right sense of what a spiritual teacher is, or what spiritual consciousness is. And we do not realize that while we may be equal in having a vote, and we might be equal in the opportunity to earn a livelihood, we are far from being equal in spiritual development. And we of the Western world just do not lend ourselves to being a student. We are very eager in the first year to jump up into being at least a master, and then going on from there. Whereas the spiritual life is really one of a continuous dedication to that which is greater than we are. There is a good reason that the word humility comes in so much. And humility in its true sense is but the recognition of the nature of spiritual consciousness. What is the responsibility of the student preparing for initiation and the responsibility of the teacher? Actually, I don't believe that a student can consciously prepare for initiation. Initiation is an act of grace. It is bestowed on individuals at a certain time in their unfoldment. And personally, I've never seen it work out that way, that someone had the goal of initiation. Rather, the goal is the attainment of that mind that was in Christ Jesus, or the attainment of spiritual consciousness, without any thought of initiation or effects of initiation. And then at a certain period, grace takes over, and this relationship is established between teacher and student. Now, the responsibility of the student on the path of spiritual realization is, of course, meditation. The entire secret lies in meditation. It is in meditation that we lose the self with a small s and gain the self with a capital S. It is in meditation that we are developing or enriching or unfolding our inner self. It is not while the human mind is busy with a goal, an ambition, an attainment. It is when the human mind loses a goal of life or an ambition or an attainment. Now, the more of a master one becomes, the more of a servant they really are. So that there never has been a master who called himself master. There never has been a master who didn't understand that he wasn't really a master, he was a servant. He was a servant unto all who come unto me, heavy laden. He is a servant to all who come seeking the light. The master of the master is really that divine consciousness which constitutes the master. And therefore, it isn't the person appearing. That is why the master said, "Do not call me master. Do not call me good. There is but one master. There is but one good." So it is that when a title is given to a person of master or maestro or guru, remember, it is only in a way of identifying that individual's spiritual attainment. It is a sign. I remember when Swami Yogananda was known as Swami, which is a certain state of evolved consciousness. And then he went to India and saw the old master himself, and that master recognized that he had gone beyond any consciousness that could be called Swami and gave him the title of Paramahamsa. Now, it isn't that a flesh and blood man is Paramahamsa or great master. It is that the consciousness attained is that. And so the individual who has attained a master's consciousness now becomes a servant of everybody. And so you can see what a terrible mess he'd be in if he wanted to set himself aside to be bowed down to. So the preparation for spiritual attainment is to forsake a goal, so that, supposing initiation came to you at this moment, and then you were told never to appear in public again, never let yourself be seen, get yourself a cabin in the woods somewhere and pray. Now just think how you'd feel if you knew you were a master and nobody else could know it, and you couldn't even wear a robe. And yet actually, everyone who has attained the high realization has been given something to do that made it impossible for them to have name, fame, while they were doing it. Later, they may have been given the honor of being a savior. Later, you know that the Master, Christ Jesus, never was known as the Savior, the Messiah, during his own lifetime. He was a simple rabbi walking up and down the streets and villages. And many have even gone through persecution. Others have known what it is to be out in the country, in the mountains, hungry, and sometimes not too well, because of the stress of human conditions. And so it is that a real master doesn't look anything like a master. The real master is more like the servant that comes knocking at the door and saying, "Can you give me a little food?" If you have the good vision to recognize that master, there is a great blessing in it for you. So then, certainly the prime preparation would be that understanding that I am ready to be nothing. I'm ready to be unknown. I'm ready to do nothing. If I'm instructed to sit in silence the rest of my days, I will sit in silence the rest of my days. If I'm bidden to take a cabin somewhere and pray for the world, I will do that. And above all things, certainly never let the neighbors know that you're a person of spiritual attainment. That's fatal. And the responsibility of the teacher. The responsibility of a spiritual teacher is a responsibility not to the student. It is a responsibility to God. The spiritual teacher must remain unspotted in the world, but not of it, untainted by the ambitions of the world, untainted by the worldly desires. There's no virtue in that. Any spiritual teacher will tell you there's no virtue in being that way, because there is no capacity to be otherwise. There again, you see, in attaining any spiritual height, no one can take credit for it, because no one has done anything to deserve it or earn it. Even on our lower levels, I can remember the time of my very first entrance to the spiritual path, when the first sign was that I couldn't smoke, I couldn't drink, I couldn't play cards, I couldn't even go across the border there and put a $2 bet on a horse. All of that disappeared. Well, do you know how foolish it would have been if I had gone around taking credit for it and saying how noble I am, when I had nothing to do with it? Those things were taken from me. There's no credit to me. And so it is, if one does go higher on the spiritual path and attain a humility, attain a complete freedom from any worldly desire or worldly fear. Remember, no one has attained spiritually while they have a fear of death. That is the surest sign that one has not attained, because almost with the first real realization, the fear of death is gone because of the realization of life eternal. I am life eternal. Whether I live it in this state or the next state, or whether I live it on this plane or that plane, is of relative unimportance. And there again, how could one possibly take credit for not fearing death when it isn't something they did or accomplished, but it was something that was done for them, a grace that was given for them? In the same way, a spiritual teacher would have no problems at all if it weren't either for family or students. Every problem that touches a spiritual teacher has to do either with his family or his students. It's their problems that he's taking on, or she. Therefore, there could be no credit to having no problems, because the problems are dissolved by that divine grace that gave illumination. And so all the way up, even to the point of the Master and his willingness to be crucified, he could not take credit and say, look what I'm doing for you. Because he isn't. It is something that is being done to him and through him by something far greater than himself, that which is the real master of his being. How is the death of the self exemplified in different teachings? Well, in the Master's experience, you have the crucifixion, the resurrection, and the ascension. Now, the crucifixion could be an actual physical crucifixion. The resurrection could be an actual resurrection from the grave, but not necessarily so. In other words, the crucifixion, which is the death of the self, the crossing out of the self, comes in any dark night of the soul when the last trace of selfhood is swallowed up, and there is nothing left but that light, that divine selfhood. No more any I, me, or mine, just the I, that is the I of you. This is exemplified in the Master's experience by the crucifixion, the resurrection, and the ascension above all personal selfhood. In the experience of Paul, it is in his statement of, ye must die daily and be reborn of the Spirit, or you must die and be reborn of water. In the older teachings, you have the story of Osiris, you have the story of the phoenix rising up out of its own ashes, you have the story of the crucifixions of 6 spiritual masters before Jesus, each one of whom rose again. You have in your wisdom schools the death of the student. Now, every student of a wisdom school has to go through a death and be buried and be resurrected, raised up again, before they are given their spiritual status. The fraternal teachings all encompass the death of the initiate and his being raised up again. All of this symbolic to show the death of the selfhood and rising up out of that dust of the corpse, rising up out of the tomb, that divine selfhood which I am, that selfhood which I am, which thou art. So then, if you trace back through the Egyptian teachings and the teachings of Greece, you will find always the death of the Master and the resurrection or the rebirth. And these are exemplifications of our experience. For the day must come, whether it is encompassed during this particular lifetime on earth, or whether it is accomplished at another, the day must come when we die. Not in the sense of that physical death of disease or age or accident, but when we die to self-preservation as the first law of nature. You will know in some degree how rapidly you're dying by the extent to which you hold on to that first law of human nature. Self-preservation is the first law of human nature. Now, if you are at that point where, if you had a revolver in your home and a burglar came in and you would shoot him, you haven't died yet. You are still in humanhood, self-preservation. If you believe that your country, in the event of any difficulty, should throw the bomb before the other country does, you haven't started on your spiritual path, because you are still under the law of self-preservation. And remember what a terrible law that is. It is saying, my life is more valuable than their lives. You remember our position when the bombs were thrown at Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Why were those bombs thrown? Well, the president said that we saved 125,000 of our soldiers' lives. Yes, in doing that, we took 200,000 of the other fellows' lives. Now, if you feel that that's justifiable, you are not on the spiritual path. You are very, very much immersed in materialism, because you are saying, my life is more valuable than theirs, or my son's life is more valuable than their son's life. It doesn't sound good when you hear it that way, does it? So it is. On the spiritual path, and especially as you rise above the personal sense of self, you hear the Master say, put up thy sword. I know they're going to crucify me, but what's the difference whether I die or this soldier dies? Isn't it the one life? You can't find it right to kill him in protecting me. Life is life, whether it's his life or my life. And the Master knew that. I know what my fate is, but don't you dare take someone else's life to protect my life, because then I lose my whole demonstration of what I've taught you. I have taught you to lay down your life in order that you may find it. No greater love hath man than to lay down his life for his friend. In other words, in that which you give up, you find yourself. Only in the degree of your surrender or self-surrender are you ever finding yourself. And if ever you think to preserve your life by taking another, or having your life saved by taking another, be assured you have given yourself proof that you have not advanced spiritually. It only takes a little spiritual light to see that the life of one individual cannot be more important than another, for life is life. And actually, my life is your life. Your life is my life. And every time you die, I die. Every time I die, you die. Don't you think for a moment that everyone who lives in a state where there is capital punishment dies every time someone is executed? Some bit of them shrivels. You can't help it if you're anything above an animal. You can't help it. And when you stop to think that as a citizen you are pulling that rope, you know then that the law is operating. As ye sow, so shall ye reap. You are never on the spiritual path until you're above the pairs of opposites, until you are above this good and evil, above this me and mine, or me and thee, or mine and thine, until there is one. When there is one, you can feed the multitudes and have 20 baskets, 12 baskets left over. You can heal the multitudes. You can forgive the multitudes, but not while there is a sense of self that is seeking for itself. The master had a treasurer. It was necessary to have a treasurer. Why? Because there are expenses in traveling. There are expenses in living. Therefore, to meet those expenses, he had a treasurer. That was no sign of self, because what he collected wasn't for his personal glorification. It was for his food, his clothing, his housing, his transportation, and that of his disciples, and probably for purposes of benevolence. But for him to have collected it with the idea, this is all mine, of course he would have been out of the kingdom of heaven in a moment. So then, again, you find that the obligation of the teacher is not to be concerned for himself or herself, but to be concerned that the functions of his office are being performed. Do those who experience initiation when physically asleep bring back into waking consciousness a specific knowledge of the initiation undergone? Yes. Yes, there is no loss of that, because here you have a specific act of grace, and no act of grace could result in loss, certainly not loss of the experience. Undoubtedly, that method of initiation was chosen because it was the best way of breaking through the barriers of human thought and busyness. Oh yes, the experiences that are given to us in dreams are carried over. In my experience, these are very few. The one major one you know about, that of the chapter New Horizon, that was definitely given me in a dream, and which was copied down and became that chapter, and probably the most important chapter in our writings. Now, even before the ultimate initiation, there are stages that we go through, and one of the important stages is the one that all of our students are in. Any student of the Infinite Way who has been a student for a year or two must be in this stage of spiritual development, that of consciousness of the presence. To begin with, the writings themselves, the tapes, are, as you see, the emanation of consciousness, and carry that consciousness that must lift the student above their first degree, their humanhood, into this awareness of the presence. And certainly those who have had our classwork must, either at a first or some later class, have been lifted in the class to an awareness, because that is the main function of this work, The main function of our work is not instruction. The few principles that are necessary to know, you can read in the books and hear on the tapes and memorize if you like. But that is not the function of this work. The function of this work is to bring the experience to the student. That is why we have classes. I cannot teach students anything new at this stage. There have been too many classes, and there just isn't anything new to teach. Therefore, and this has been true for a long time, therefore, the function of the class is not to teach something new. Probably the exception is those who are going through a class for the first time. The function of the class is to lift the students into the awareness of my presence. Lift the student into the actual awareness of my presence, of my kingdom. Now let us take this word my. It is spelt with a capital M. And here is the Master talking. My kingdom is not of this world. Now why are you here? Not to learn a message which is embodied in 20 books and a couple of hundred tapes. You are here to become aware of my kingdom, not to learn that there is a my kingdom. You already know that from the Master's teaching, and it has been repeated to you in every book of the Infinite Way. Therefore, you could not possibly come here to learn that there is a my kingdom. You knew that before you came. You are here to experience my kingdom, so that you will know what my kingdom is, at least in some measure, because it is a continuing experience, a deepening one, an enriching one, and it continues to unfold unto eternity. But at least my kingdom must be glimpsed. You must, in a class, experience a depth of consciousness so that you do know that the goal isn't to increase your income or give you better health. You will have an increased income and you will have better health. These are the added things. But that is not the purpose of being here. The purpose of being here is to actually enter my kingdom, actually experience my kingdom established in you. Now, my kingdom is not of this world. That is why you cannot pray for anything of this world, because my kingdom doesn't recognize this world. My kingdom cannot add to your dollars. My kingdom cannot add to your body. My kingdom is a spiritual kingdom, and as you seek and enter my kingdom, you will find all the other things added unto you. But please let us not concern ourselves with the added things. Let us not seek baubles. Let us seek my kingdom. Take no thought for your life, what you shall eat or what you shall drink, or wherewithal you shall be clothed. Seek ye my kingdom, the kingdom of God, and my rightness. Not human rightness, not just being a better human being, but my rightness, spiritual rightness. You'll find all the things of life are added without your taking any thought. So let us not take any thought for the things of life, but ponder this: my kingdom that is not of this world. What is it? I'm reaching out within me for it, seeking to enter this my kingdom, or seeking that my kingdom be established in you. The realm of the real. Immortality. Immortality. My kingdom is a state of immortality. You come face to face with life eternal, and then can say, neither life nor death can separate me from this kingdom. Wherever I go, I carry it with me. Now let us seek the next step. My peace give I unto you, not as the world giveth. Now again, you see, not just good health, not just good supply. That's the peace the world can give you, and it's not a lasting peace. But my peace. And you have to be thinking my, with a capital M. My peace give I unto you, and this message is coming up to you from deep down in your chest. You aren't saying it, you are hearing it. It is coming up to you, to your ears, and it is saying to you, my peace give I unto you. Now, do you know that as soon as you feel a sense of peace, you have attained the consciousness of the presence? The moment that you feel that peace, you have attained the consciousness of the presence, because only the consciousness of the presence could give you that peace. In other words, every time that you meditate, every time you are in treatment or prayer or meditation, and you end by waiting a few moments, speak, Lord, thy servant heareth, and wait, and the deep breath comes to you, or any sign from within, a feeling of peace, weight falling from the shoulder, any sign, you have experienced the presence, and you now have the consciousness of the presence, the awareness of the presence. You are now conscious that there is a presence there. You are aware that there is a presence there. If this isn't happening to you in this message of the infinite way, you are not fulfilling yourself in this message, because this is its goal. This is its goal. It is not to teach you any truth more than you need for bringing about a state of inner peace, but its goal is the experience of the Absolute, the experience of that awareness of a presence. I have described that this way. If you can just imagine a mother and child crossing the street at a very busy intersection, and the child reaching up for the mother's hand, and then the mother and child walking across that crowded street, and try to see the attitude of that child. It has no concern for what's going on around it, because it feels the mother's hand. It's got hold of the mother's hand, or the mother's hand has hold of the child's hand, and as long as that's going on, the child is busy talking, looking around, dancing around, unconcerned about all the traffic, because what has it to be concerned about? Can it feel the mother's hand? And that's all it needs. Now, this is exactly our experience. The very moment that we can reach within feel a sense of peace, this inner comfort, this inner assurance, we have God by the hand, or God's hand has us. And we now have the awareness of that presence of God, like the child has the awareness of the presence of the mother. It only needs that touch of the mother's hand for the child to know it has the mother's presence. And so it is, we only need a touch, a light breath of assurance. Sometimes it comes in words. I will never leave you. Thou art my beloved Son. Fear not, it is I. Sometimes it's nothing more than a breath, an inner relief or release. But something assures us this is the presence of God. And this is the goal, the consciousness of the presence of God, the conscious awareness of the presence of God. Then we can sing the whole Bible from cover to cover. Thou art ever with me. I will never leave thee. Before Abraham was, I am with thee. I will be with thee unto the end of the world. I am thy bread and thy meat and thy wine and thy water. I am thy resurrection. I will restore unto you the lost years of the locust. Fear not, it is I. Well, now you're living, moving, and having your being in a constant consciousness of God's presence. Now, there is really no other life worth living. To have to go through these 24 hours a day unaware of a divine presence, it must be hell. It must be horrible. Not to have the assurance that we are not alone in the world, bucking 4 billion or 3 billion other people. Not to be able to feel that regardless of whether stocks go up or down, or whether we have war or peace, that our good can be taken from us. To feel that we are at the mercy of every ambitious man who wants more power, more territory, more money, more fame. But all of this disappears. The whole fear of human existence disappears, and nothing else can make it disappear. There's no teaching can make it disappear. No Bible that has ever been written can make it disappear. No spiritual book or metaphysical book can ever make it disappear. The fear of the world. One thing alone removes the fear of the world. My presence. My peace. When you have my presence, you're living in heaven even while you're on earth. When you have my peace, you have something that transcends wealth in the bank or health of the body. Because even when these are lost, my peace, my presence restores these. Therefore, know this. You are not living at all. You're only existing until you have felt my presence, until you can reach within yourself and know that I am there, until you can reach within your own consciousness and know that I am ever with you, and I will never leave thee nor forsake thee. I will be with thee unto the end of the world. I will be your food, your housing, your shelter. I will be a fortress if you need one. I will be your high tower if you need one. But only know me. Become aware of me in you. Become aware of my presence in you. Live always in the certainty of my presence in you, and you will understand what I have taught, and this will be given to you at quite great length in the latest Los Angeles class. Prayer. You see what prayer is? Really, prayer in its highest sense, prayer has nothing to do with words or thoughts. Prayer is an attitude. The moment you can be without words and thoughts and just feel. This is prayer. You feel that I am with you, that I am closer to you than breathing, nearer than hands and feet. You feel that I am come, that you might have life and you might have it more abundantly. You don't have to say it. You don't have to quote it. You don't have to think it. There's just this feeling, I am there. It's not an exhilaration, because that would come into the realm of emotion. It's really certainty. It's conviction. It's assurance. It's, above all things, it's peace. Peace. You're not praying if you want anything. Well, yes, you are, but it's spelt with an E. But really, you're not in prayer when you're wanting anything. You are in prayer when you are abiding in the Word. When you are abiding in me and letting me abide in you, you are in prayer. When you are resting in the Word, you are in prayer. If your mind is rushing around looking for truths, you're not in prayer, you're in a mental treatment. And that has its place, too, on the human level. But we are not on the human level at this moment, and the infinite way doesn't function on the human level. It functions only from the mystical realm of rest in me, and let me abide in you. The infinite way is not a way of changing disease into health. It is a way of becoming conscious of my kingdom, of my presence, of my peace, and then letting these other things be added unto you. Being a beholder as your outer life is transformed. You don't transform it with treatments or prayers. You only transform yourself into that state of awareness. Know ye not that ye are the temple of God? Well, then be a temple of God. And let God fill that temple. Let my presence go before you to make the crooked places straight. Let my presence walk beside you. And you see, the more this capital M-Y is with you, or the more the word I is with you. This I within me is God. This is the very presence of God. I am that I am. I am He. I, in the midst of me, is mighty. I need only realize I am, and then rest. That is a recognition of the presence. That is a conscious awareness of the presence. That is really the glory of the Father being made manifest as the glory of the Son. It isn't that I of myself am anything. It is only because I in the midst of me. It is only because my kingdom is established in me. It is only because my presence goeth before me and is with me. It is only because my peace is upon me. And as we dwell in that, We are in this mystical stage, the book of John, in which the presence dwells in us. It is the stage taught, not taught, no, he never taught it, he revealed it. Paul, I can do all things through Christ. I live, yet not I. Christ liveth my life. Can you see yourself back a little bit and feeling this Christ living your life, and all the responsibility is gone from your shoulder. All the responsibility is gone from you. All you're called on to do is be pure. Don't go searching around to get something. Be pure. Let the Spirit fulfill itself within you. Then you are in the message of the infinite way. You are living by the message of the infinite way, but really it's the infinite way of life that is really now living you. Thank you.